Welcome to Creamer Media's Polity. I am Amy Witherden. I am meeting with Centre for Development and Enterprise Executive Director Ann Bernstein to discuss her recent book titled The Case for Business in Developing Economies. Ann, in your book you talk about the power that business has to change society. What do you mean by this?
Well, you know, the way in which people talk about business, it's generally a conversation where it's what more can business do or should business do to help society? And that tends to ignore that just doing business, companies have extraordinary, mainly positive impacts on their local communities or the countries in which they operate. So that's what I'm thinking. I'm talking about the impacts companies have directly. They pay taxes, they create jobs, they create wealth, they train their employees, they do all sorts of things that are not part of the conversation. They give voice to people. You don't just get a job, you get a career often. But they also do lots of indirect things, and this is not talked about at all. In the indirect impact, companies have enormous consequences in a society. So take, for example, the world's most modern companies that went into China. They were doing this to open up markets, to expand their profits, but in the process of doing that, they were bringing modernization to that society. They were teaching Chinese workers who got jobs in those companies about the latest technology, but also about modern ways of getting the most out of people, how people work together. Women who go and work in factories for very low wages in Asia or in Newcastle, South Africa, they're getting opportunities that they can't get anywhere else. And although these jobs might look like ones you or I don't want to do, and they're certainly not great conditions or great pay, they're the first step on a ladder of opportunity for these people, and they don't have better options. And if you can do that, then other things start to emerge. You can start a little business, you've got a little bit of money, you've got some experience in the world of work.
The role of corporate social investment is important, but you say that businesses can do good by just doing business. Please, can you explain this?
Well, just doing business seems so simple, but companies, in their struggle to be profitable and to provide the services and goods that customers want and need, they're doing all sorts of things. Companies today, modern business, are the hubs of innovation. And think of pharmaceutical companies. Everybody likes to attack them, but actually almost 95% of the world's medical inventions have come from large American pharmaceutical companies or Western pharmaceutical companies. Think of the innovations that result in you and I sticking earphones in our ears and listening to music as we walk to the shops. Somebody had to innovate to do that, and they're much more important innovations. They're doing all sorts of interesting things now in companies, looking at low-cost ways of testing people's health. So we don't talk of companies as great innovators. We don't talk of companies as these great organizers of labor and resources to produce something more valuable. The conversation is completely skewed. It's always about, have you done this? Have you done that? All extraneous to the business, or generally extraneous, or it's negative. It's as though companies have to pay reparations for their evil deeds to make profits. And this is crazy. Companies are part of society, and modern business today generally has phenomenally positive impacts that are profound and far-reaching. They revolutionize the world in which we live.
Your explanation of the criticism that businesses receive by certain aspects of society seems particularly relevant in South Africa, where there are vocal unionist and socialist contingents. Why do you say that businesses should not be apologetic and try to appease society?
Well, I think what's happened is it's very rare to find a business leader or chief executive who says, let me tell you why my company is good for this community or this country. Have you ever heard anyone make a speech like that?
I haven't, but Anglo-American has a campaign at the moment.
They're starting to be a change. I think Standard Charters, Anglo, a few others. But in general, it's very hard to find a company. I did some research for a year and a half. I looked for its chief executive of a global company that made one speech, just one speech, that was entirely devoted to, this is my company, this is what we do, and this is why it's good for this country. And I couldn't find one. I found one or two paragraphs and I got excited, but then the rest of the speech would all be about their charity work. Now, I'm not opposed to corporate social investment, but I am opposed to continually barraging companies to defend what they do all the time, as though just doing business, which is a remarkable activity, isn't sufficient. So that's, and when I attack corporate social responsibility, I'm attacking the movement that's saying you must change, you must become something different. You must, in effect, become something other than a profit-making, highly competitive corporation. I think if you look at the history of the last century, the process of opening up to enterprise and to encouraging more and more companies has been phenomenally productive for the world. And we should encourage that. We shouldn't be continually trying to constrain it or limit it. Now, that doesn't mean states aren't important. They are. They're vitally important. Countries need effective states. And often a lot of the criticisms of multinational companies operating in developing countries are really attacks on the failure of governance. But somehow the company seems a more vulnerable target and people go for them. What has happened with all of this pressure on companies is that too many business leaders and their companies have collapsed intellectually. They don't stand up for what they do. They don't describe it. They often don't even know the impact that they're having, changing the lives of women, for example, who get opportunities they've never had before. And so we're not seeing enough assertion in a positive way by business organizations and business leaders of the good that they do. They're always on the defensive. And I'm saying that's a disservice to the countries in which they operate and to the millions of people who can benefit from competitive capitalism.
Now, your book is called The Case for Business in Developing Economies. Can you please provide some examples of why business is important for developing economies especially?
Well, there are lots of examples. Think of South Africa. When we became a democracy, we had a business sector that was reasonably vibrant, sophisticated for a developing country. We have one of the world-class financial sectors, world-class mining sector. We had all these things, even though they were operating in an imperfect apartheid environment. So they have helped build South Africa, and business was there to be part of the new society. Take Mauritius. Mauritius did a number of things, including opening up to garment factories and exporting their products to the global market. This has transformed this country. Think of Singapore, where markets and development has been driven through enterprise and a smart state. So I'm not saying business can do it all or business on its own. I'm saying smart states can open up to enterprise and modern business and can use the energy and dynamic and the tax resources that companies provide to really build their countries, to pay for the infrastructure, the education and health that countries need in order to move from being developing to developed.
Great. Thank you, Anne.